Hey everyone, welcome back to Day 18. Today, we're diving into some deep and intense narratives from Genesis, specifically chapters 19 through 21. We'll be exploring the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the relationship between Abraham and his family, and the test of faith that unfolds. It's a story with a lot of moving parts, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's a pretty wild series of events. Let's start with the infamous destruction of Sodom. Lot, who's Abraham's nephew, is living in the city when two angels arrive. Lot tries to protect them from the wickedness of the people in Sodom, offering them hospitality, but things quickly take a turn for the worse.
Right. So Lot's hospitality is almost immediately met with violence when the men of Sodom surround his house. It's pretty shocking. They demand that Lot hand over the visitors so they can, abuse them. Lot's response is heartbreaking too. He offers his daughters instead. Do you think he genuinely thought this was a good solution? Or was he just trying to protect the visitors?
It's a tough one to call. I think Lot, in that moment, was desperate. He knew how wicked the people of Sodom were, and offering his daughters, though awful, might have seemed like the only way to protect his guests. But it's so disturbing because it shows just how much moral decay the city had experienced.
Exactly. And then, the angels intervene, pulling Lot back inside and blinding the men who were trying to break down the door. That's a pretty dramatic way to stop the chaos. But here's the twist. The angels then tell Lot to gather anyone else he cares about, because the city is going to be destroyed.
It's interesting how Lot goes to his sons-in-law and they don't take him seriously. They think he's joking. Imagine being in his shoes, knowing what's coming and trying to convince others, and yet no one listens. It just shows the level of disbelief and disregard for the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, and when the morning finally comes, the angels have to drag Lot, his wife, and two daughters out of the city. It's almost like Lot's family is so entrenched in the corruption of Sodom that they hesitate to leave, even when their lives are at risk.
It's such a strange moment because it's clear that God is showing mercy by rescuing them, but Lot's lingering, his reluctance, is almost heartbreaking. And then there's the famous command, don't look back. Lot's wife, though, disobeys and turns to look at the city, and she turns into a pillar of salt.
Yeah, that's one of those moments that sticks with you. It feels symbolic in many ways, doesn't it? The idea that you can't cling to the past, even when everything seems familiar or tempting. And then, the destruction rains down. Fire and sulfur from the sky. Complete devastation. Sodom and Gomorrah are wiped off the map.
It's a powerful and sobering picture. The destruction isn't just a punishment for Sodom's sin, but a reminder of the seriousness of God's justice. And the aftermath is just as tragic. Lot ends up fleeing to a small town called Zoar, and even there, he doesn't feel safe and moves to the mountains, living in a cave with his daughters.
That's a tragic twist for Lot. But then the daughters, believing they are the last people left on earth, take matters into their own hands. They get their father drunk and sleep with him to ensure the continuation of their family line. It's disturbing, but I also wonder if it's a reflection of how desperate they felt in that moment.
It's one of those moments in the Bible that leaves you questioning the moral and emotional state of the people involved. I mean, these women were so desperate to continue their family's legacy that they went to extreme lengths. But it also raises questions about faith, survival, and human desperation. God had already promised to protect them, but they still felt the need to take matters into their own hands.
Exactly. And from that union come two nations, Moab and Ammon. These two nations play significant roles later on in the Bible. Moab, in particular, has a complex relationship with Israel. So even this unsettling event leads to the formation of something larger in the biblical narrative.
It really does show how even in the most unexpected, difficult circumstances, God's plan unfolds. Lot's family was saved, but their actions also impacted the future. Moving to Genesis chapter 20, we see Abraham once again make a questionable decision when he lies about Sarah being his sister, not his wife, to protect himself from King Abimelech.
Yes, it's almost like a repeat of what happened in Egypt earlier in Abraham's journey. It seems like he's afraid of being killed because of Sarah's beauty, but in this case, God warns Abimelech in a dream and prevents him from sinning. What do you think of Abraham's actions here?
I think it highlights Abraham's ongoing struggle with trust. Even though he's seen God's faithfulness time and time again, he still doesn't fully trust that God will protect him in these situations. It's like he forgets about God's promises when the pressure is on.
Yeah, and it's also a reminder that even great figures in the Bible, like Abraham, aren't perfect. They make mistakes, they struggle with faith, but God still uses them. That's a message that a lot of people can relate to, I think.
Absolutely. And in the end, Abimelech does the right thing by returning Sarah to Abraham. And there's this whole scene where Abraham prays for Abimelech and his household, and God heals them. It's a moment where God's grace and Abraham's role as a prophet come into play.
It's interesting that God continues to bless Abraham, even when Abraham falters. It shows the depth of God's mercy. Speaking of blessings, we see the birth of Isaac in chapter 21. After all those years of waiting and trusting, Sarah finally gives birth to a son. It's such a joyous moment, and Sarah's reaction is priceless. She laughs, saying, "God has made me laugh."
Yes, it's beautiful because after everything, she finally gets to see God's promise fulfilled in her own life. She thought it was impossible, but God made it happen. And then, of course, there's the tension between Sarah and Hagar after Isaac is born. Sarah sees Hagar's son mocking Isaac, and that leads to Hagar and her son being sent away.
That's a tough moment for Abraham. He loves both of his sons, but God reassures him that he'll take care of Hagar's son Ishmael. It's such a complex situation, with a lot of emotions and tensions running high. But God's provision is clear. He doesn't forget about Ishmael, even though Isaac is the child of promise.
Exactly. God is faithful to both families in different ways. It's a reminder that God's plans aren't always as we expect, but he is still working behind the scenes. And in the end, Abraham and Abimelech make a covenant about a well, which ends up being a sign of peace and understanding between them.
It's incredible how even through all these ups and downs, God continues to show his faithfulness to Abraham and his descendants. It's a huge theme in Genesis, and I think it's one that resonates deeply. Despite human mistakes, God's promises remain unshaken.
Yeah, and that's what makes this whole story so powerful. Even when we mess up, God still has a plan for us. It's not always easy, and sometimes things get messy. But his faithfulness is the constant thread through it all.
Absolutely. That's the core message of these chapters. And I think it's one that's worth reflecting on, especially in our own lives. No matter what we face or how many mistakes we make, God's promises still stand.
Definitely. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Genesis chapters 19 to 21. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it thought-provoking. As always, take some time to reflect on these stories and remember that God's faithfulness is a thread that runs through our lives, just as it did with Abraham and Lot.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, take care and keep reflecting on those deeper truths. God bless.